don't be linear in how you think about belief systems, practices, any of those things. It's so beautiful to have a chance, even if it's scary. People are amazing. The world is amazing. When I started my professional journey, I had no idea what the hell I was going to do with my life. What you learn through service industry is people are going to be nasty to you. How do you react? People are going to be kind to you. How do you appreciate? People are going to be loyal. Like, how do you achieve that? Go embrace the world. The world is bigger than the state you live in. The world is bigger than the country you live in. Find a community that embraces you, loves you, and empowers you. I want to be the change I want to see in the world.
So I'm your host, Gaurav Garg, and we welcome all our viewers to our show, Amazing Mentor. Today with us is Miss Jaime Fiorucci. She is founder and CEO of HealthEd Global. At HealthEd Global, they believe healthcare and education are basic human rights. Leadership takes many forms, and the focus of her career has been to facilitate the success of others through coaching, clear expectation settings, and professional development opportunities. She is also Director Voluntary Rural Empowerment. It's a pleasure to welcome Ms. Jaime Fiorucci to our show, Amazing Mentor. Welcome, Jaime.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate the chance to engage and share our journey and hopefully inspire others to think about the relationships and path that they're taking in both their personal and professional lives. So thank you for this opportunity.
My pleasure. Start from your student life. So what kind of student were you?
All right. So I was very different versions of myself through my academic performance. And I think this is really important for young people to understand, particularly in today's world where smartphones are causing mental health challenges, where the access to information that may or may not be correct is influencing decision making. And I shared that piece to begin with because I'm grateful that didn't exist when I was a child. And my academic journey has been one that is non-traditional. So I actually graduated high school early with honors, a year and a half in advance. I was 16 years old when I very excitedly went to college, four-year university, accepted, very much an academically motivated student through my undergraduate experience. One of the things that I realized, though, when I went into university was I didn't feel a sense of community. I didn't feel a sense of belongingness. And that led me to do something completely different with my life that horrified my family. And I've done that again, which I'm sure we'll get to later. But I decided that I was going to quit and that I was going to instead move to New York City and I was going to learn life skills and I was going to learn how to survive. I was born and raised in Kansas. Kansas is middle America, very kind of easy lifestyle, low cost of living. But based on work I had done during my high school years and advanced to college, I was able to have experiences that took me across the country and then ultimately internationally. So I dropped out of college. And I think that's completely okay. I realized after the first year that and it's not that college was wrong for me. It's that the college I went to wasn't aligned with the values and the outcomes that I wanted to see for my career. So I lived in New York for a number of years, lived in other countries. I've lived in Greece, I've lived in Spain, I've lived in Portugal, in Africa, had the opportunity to really broaden my view of what the world looks like. And then I came back to the United States, came back to Kansas, of all places, and said, okay, now I'm ready to get serious about education. And do you know what I found out through that experience was that life skills matter. And they mattered so much that I didn't have to get a bachelor's degree to actually pursue my MBA. So I hold a master's degree without ever pursuing a very high debt load of a bachelor's degree that I didn't feel like suited me. But because I could pass the entrance assessment, I hold an MBA in international business from a high-ranking private school. And that was motivated by the desire to learn in a way that suited me. And I finally found a model, and I found coaches, and I found a structure that supported the way that I learned best.
So how was your childhood, and what all happiest childhood memory you carry forward?
My happiest childhood memory is, honestly, I have to think about it for a minute, because my childhood was wonderful, and I'm grateful for that, because living in Africa, not very many people have the opportunity to say that. My childhood was very, very pleasant. But when I think about how my childhood connects to who I became as an adult, I think that's probably how I'd like to answer that question. But I had an interesting experience because I was terrible at everything I wanted to do. I wanted to be a cheerleader. I can't put my legs in the air when I jump. It was awful. It was embarrassing. I did not make the team. I wanted to play volleyball. Like, the balls were hitting my neck. Like, embarrassing. Not coordinated. I tried softball all day long. And those weren't the things. And when you live in certain countries or you live in certain states, that's what defines success in the minds of some. But I was very fortunate that a mentor that I still talk to and love dearly pulled me aside one day and said, you know, you're taking up a spot on this volleyball squad for someone who needs it. And have you ever thought about debate? Have you ever thought about extemporaneous speaking? Like, have you ever thought about chess club? Like, maybe athletics isn't for you. But she did so in such a constructive way and made the connections that helped me see that there was an alternate path for me. And that was the most beautiful form of divine intervention that I could ask for. And if I had kept trying to play volleyball with this happening, I would never be where I am right now because of her. Her name is Carolyn Harding, and I love her, and she's still with us. And I every year send her an update on how grateful I am for her encouraging me to pursue my intellectual talents and for coaching me and guiding me along that path when in high school, like, that's not something that's usually considered very cool. But if I had done what the cool kids did, I probably wouldn't be where I am now.
So as we have talked about how you were as a student, so what all notorious things you have done in your college life?
In college, yes. So when I decided to go back for my advanced degree, I had to take an entrance assessment. That was why I was able to skip getting a baccalaureate degree. And I was able to pass that assessment by preparation. So I'm grateful for that. But how I was as a student in that environment, in an MBA program, small cohorts, selective entry, you had to fit a certain cut score, academic profile, professional profile as well. I was disruptive, if you want me to be completely honest. What I recognized when I got in there was, wow, like, we've got a lot of people in here who are so extremely talented, and the rote memorization style of learning is not necessarily benefiting us. And we had some interesting, what I would call constructive conflict. And that's when you come together as a team, you raise an issue, and you look at ways that you can be better together. My MBA program was only 16 students because that was the amount of seats that were allowed. And so those who hit the highest scores, they were allowed in. And we had a beautiful journey because we all went through the same progression together. All 16 of us graduated. We had different derailments along the way. And I'm so proud to still be friends and in contact with many of them. This was in the US. I obviously live in Africa now. But how I was as a student was, I would say, somewhat lackadaisical at that point, but extremely motivated about the experience of others. And I think part of that came from, at the time, I was working for a firm who delivered educational tools. And so I'm looking at how education is being given to me, where I'm like, I'm supposed to read 3 books over the weekend and come to in class all day Friday night and Saturday, where I work for a company that is software as a service provider and does this way better. Like, I struggled with that mentally and emotionally, in terms of like, there's a better way to do this, and there's a better way to engage learners. There was conflict. There was absolute conflict with the pedagogy of learning and how we support people in reaching their full potential is not linear. It's meeting every learner where they are. So how I was as a student, I would say disruptive is the word.
So what about your hobbies and interests?
So when it comes to hobbies, I am a dog hoarder. My husband would call me a hoarder. We have 4 dogs. We have 3 children. We live in Africa. So we are extremely passionate about our community. We live in a very rural part of Uganda where there are no facilities for water. We don't have a school or a church or even like sterile bathroom. And so we've been building these projects from the ground up for the last year and a half. And I've invested heavily in making what we would consider a viable village community that respects the traditions of the African population that we serve. My husband is Ugandan, born and raised, lives in this area. And part of the beauty of the project that we're doing there is really to create a sense of community and a sense of belonging. And when we think about what's happening in the world right now and what makes people do crazy things, one of the number one things I read when I get into the scientific journals is a lack of belonging. And our main goal in the community that we're building and creating in Bukadia, which is here in Uganda, is to create a sense of belonging, a sense of gathering. All faiths welcome. Holy is one of my favorite celebrations in the world. If I could throw colors on your face all day long, I would. I love exploring different belief systems, religions, as my family does. Like, we're very much citizens of the world, and I think that's part of what makes us so open to others. And if I were to give anyone advice on that component, it's don't be linear in how you think about belief systems, practices, any of those things. It's so beautiful to have a chance, even if it's scary, even if you're the only one that looks like I'm the only one that looks like me in the village. I'm absolutely the only one. And it's beautiful how welcoming that is, and embrace it. It's an awesome opportunity to really connect to people on a human level that is being lost in a lot of the more developed countries.
So have you ever enjoyed Indian Holi, being in India?
Not yet, but actually I had a really interesting, and I know you're going to edit this, so I'm just going to say it, but had an opportunity to meet a large NGO from India last week, where the parents were born in the same district we work in. We met in a coffee shop because there was a downpour and both of our vehicles had to stop. And just the beauty of, like, there's no reason we would have otherwise connected. And now we're going to come back to India. Like, I've been to Hyderabad, I've been to Mumbai, I've actually had an office in Bangalore for a while that I was responsible for. And I am very much a citizen of the world, and I encourage all of my children, my family, to have that open mind and have that open spirit to accept and understand, because there's so much beauty in different cultures, different places, different experiences. But meeting them was exceptional. So we'll be visiting soon. We're actually working on a visa application because they were like, we have this great event happening. Like, we're coming. That sounds wonderful.
So you are welcome to India whenever you visit.
I love India, honestly.
So who has been your biggest influence in life, and what lesson did that person teach you?
When it comes to my biggest influence, there are two people that come to mind. And this comes down to the value of how we think about formal mentorship and influence and informal mentorship and influence. They're very different, and they both have such intrinsic value. So I want to give two examples, if that's okay. The biggest ones for me, one is my high school teacher who intervened and just said, you're never going to be a great athlete. You're never going to be great in the choir. Like, have you not thought about speaking, debating? You're smart. Do that. Have you thought about that? I didn't even know those were options to me until she pulled me aside and said, let me help you get on this trajectory. And she actually sponsored me in such a level of coaching and development that I was appointed to be on the board of directors for a 501c3 that had all senators, representatives, the most high-ranking clinical officials. There were only 12 people on the board, and I was one of them at the age of 16, based on her mentorship and her encouragement that use your voice and use it for something good, and figure out how to communicate in a way that's effective and that engages people. So I look at that as a very kind of informal opportunity where I found a passion. She helped guide me. But then I was like, okay, I understand what to do. And I love it. And I'm excited about it. And that's informal mentorship. And that happens every day. You never know who you're going to meet. You never know. And I love Malcolm Gladwell's Talking to Strangers. I encourage everyone to read that book. I encourage everyone to be curious about, who is this person next to me? Who is this person that has an interesting shirt on? And that was the whole reason I met the group from India, was I had our NGO is called Voluntary Rural Empowerment, and I had my big t-shirt on with the logo on the back, and I was like, hey, can we talk to you? Had I not had that shirt on, and had they not had the courage to talk to a stranger, very different than them, we would have never created the relationships that we have. So I look at that as such an amazing form of internal mentor, or of informal mentorship and relationship building. When I think about formal mentorship, that's a whole nother channel that has also helped me grow. And it's helped me grow as an executive as well as a person. When I was 29, I had a very strong goal. I wanted to be the vice president of my company, which is large, and I was doing the job of multiple vice presidents. I'd replaced them, and it was a big goal for me. By the time I turned 30, I want to be a vice president. And there was a bit of this conflict because of my age, and probably also, because I'm a woman. But that is what it is. But I accept those things, and I understand they're realities that we all have to deal with. However, I did have an advocate on my side, and despite the challenges we went through to get to that point, she aligned me with an executive coach, which is a formal form of mentorship, and she dramatically changed the trajectory of my career, my happiness, my joy. I would not be in Africa living what I consider my best life. I would not be smiling so freely if it were not for her. And at the time, it almost felt like punishment, because they were like, we're going to give you this coach, and it's going to be very structured, and we're going to be monitoring. There are going to be these outcomes. And so when people give you that sort of feedback that you need a coach or you need someone to guide you on your journey, hug that. Like, embrace that. That is truly one of the greatest gifts I've ever been given in my career. And I still call her to this day. That was many years ago. Clearly no longer 29. But by the time I was 30, I was a vice president. And that was my goal. And she helped me achieve it. And so I see the value of both formal and informal mentorship. And it all depends on how you look at your goal structure and who you surround yourself with. And I've been so blessed and benefited from both of those avenues. And it's always been a focus of mine as well to give that back, because it's something that everyone needs. And if you have the chance, you don't know how many people benefit from just a little bit of guidance and listening.
So any particular moment when a person's kindness made a difference in your life?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So one of my favorite memories, and what created the international global citizen that I am, is due to a single person. And I wish I knew his name, and I don't. But the story still sits in my heart, and it's why I felt comfortable traveling the world as I have. Been to over 47 countries at this point. I've lived all over the world, but my first trip internationally, I missed my flight. And I was in Greece. I was in a safe place. Skiathos. Safe island. No problem. But I missed my flight. And there were no more flights for a week and a half. And I didn't know what to do. And I got on the ferry instead to at least get to the mainland, just trying to think through, what are the steps? Okay, this is my first trip abroad. I didn't have the savviness that I do now, where I'd be like, okay, we do this, 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 this. I was 20. So it's like, okay, take control of the situation. And I remember sitting down on my luggage when I got to the mainland and just sobbing uncontrollably. And there was no other emotion to feel in that moment other than despair. And I didn't know where I was, but I didn't want to necessarily admit that. I didn't speak a language that was fluent to anyone around me, because this was a very small, island port of Greece. And this gentleman, older man, comes up to me very safely with his wife. I'm a baba. And his wife explains, Dad, I'm a dad. You cry. And he got his son on the phone, who happened to live in New York, where I lived at the time, who spoke English, who communicated what my needs were and what I was trying to do, when otherwise that situation could have gone completely differently. I mean, that was my first trip abroad. I was vulnerable. I was clueless. I mean, if you try that with me now, I have a slightly different set of approaches. But at that time, it was a very vulnerable moment. And they invited me into their cafe. They fed me dinner. They got me on a bus. They got me to the airport through just genuine kindness. And so if I think about someone who changed my life, I wish I knew the name of that man. I wish I knew the name of his wife and his son, because it was such just an emotional moment that there wasn't even that sort of exchange. We sat and we watched football, and that opened my heart so much to the beauty of the world. And I don't think I would have left the US again if that had ended poorly. That instead made me go, wow, people are amazing. The world is amazing. And there are those out there who can help you grow and guide you and direct you in a way that is constructive, and also help you when you're having a mental breakdown sitting on your luggage and just need a pizza. They served me a pizza. It was wonderful. So I look at someone who I wish I knew his name, but I will forever remember him as the reason why I became really comfortable and enthusiastic about international travel and talking to strangers.
So, do you believe in love at first sight?
Oh, absolutely. So my husband and I have worked in the nonprofit industry for most of our careers. We've both had this similar calling to serve and to be present. And we communicated, we met on LinkedIn. But it was largely because we wanted to go provide service to Uganda. And I met my husband, and I knew from our very first moment that this is the person that I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with. And we're married, and we have a 9-month-old baby now. And we raise our children together. We spend time in the village. We continue to build and invest in our community. No, this is the first person that I was just like, you're absolutely perfect for me. And his response was, you're perfect for me. And that was all driven by values. And that's what I think is, even when we have, every couple has their challenges. As you know, I'm anyone who's dated has their challenges. Even if it's down to like, what's on the menu for dinner? Like there's some sort of like disruption. But what we can always rely on is our love, our faith, and our similar sense of values. And so I can say I do believe in love at first sight because of how I met my husband, and we were married within a month of truly meeting face to face. And I could not be happier with that decision.
So, any of the favorite stories from your marriage life?
So, from my marriage life, it's honestly been such an interesting cultural experience for me because we have the beauty of a large family. And Africa has embraced me in a way that I had not experienced before. So I've been traveling to Africa for about 15 years. We live in eastern Uganda now. But one of the greatest things that I've found through our marriage and through the work that we do as well is the opportunity to be so connected to family all the time. And what a positive benefit that has for our children. Positive role modeling, positive structures of support, educational access, food access. Like, we're all in it together. We're in the process of building actually 3 blocks of schools. First one is done. We did wells. Like, we really do a lot of like deep projects within rural areas. And if you would have told me 10 years ago, the person you marry is who you're going to work with and you're not going to want to like knock them out at the end of the day, I would have been like, not possible. But we have found such an awesome balance because this family has been a beautiful asset to our life and has honestly made me a better person and has helped me self-reflect. And if there's anything that I have really embraced, it's how much Africa has helped me grow as a person, being here full time, not just as a transient visitor that gets to stay at a nice eco lodge.
So where did you start your professional journey from?
So my professional journey was largely because of the teacher that I mentioned to you and being on the board of directors for this company, that for the American Legacy Foundation. That's what drove me to move to New York. I got to stay at the Waldorf Astoria when I was 16 years old in the beautiful, gosh knows how much it cost room. And I was like, what is all this? Oh my goodness. Like, woo, a lot going on here. And from there, I saw a bigger picture. And it wasn't about wealth. And it wasn't about status. It transitioned into a calling to how do you help other people be the best that they can be? And you can do that in a myriad of ways. And through my career, There have been different ways that I've achieved that goal, but it remains solid. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, the tagline has never changed. Leader is best when people barely know they exist. When their aim fulfilled, their goal achieved, they will say, we did it ourselves. And that is leadership. And that is mentorship. And that is what has given me the empowerment that I need and the guiding light that I need to be the best leader that I can be. Via coaching, mentorship, or direct reporting structure. But that is my guiding statement, that it's not about you. It's about them. It's about helping them be successful.
So what was the first task when you started your professional journey?
When I started my professional journey, I had no idea what the hell I was going to do with my life. If you want me to be perfectly straightforward, I was an amazing bartender. Make really fancy cocktails, I can wait tables, I can multitask. And people underrate the value of having service industry experience. But that was my first job because my first job was as a lifeguard, and I couldn't handle it. Because I was like, someone's going to die, because in my brain, I'm thinking about something important, and I'm not watching if anyone's going under the water, and I'm sitting in this chair, and my skin is not great for sun. So it's like, this is not for me. But my first job was as a lifeguard, and I very quickly abandoned that idea. Like, no. So at 16, my second job, because I have always been ambitious, like I want to earn my own money, I don't want to rely on people, I want to be independent. And so my second job was working at a restaurant. And what you learn through service industry is people are going to be nasty to you. How do you react? People are going to be kind to you. How do you appreciate? People are going to be loyal. Like, how do you achieve that? There are so many lessons I learned through service industry experience that I think go undervalued when we look at applicant tracking systems right now. Then they're like, oh, well, this doesn't fit our mold. I hire on my own team, and this is in every job description. I hire for attitude. I don't hire for skills. I can teach you 9 times out of 10, unless it's like a scientific role, like if we need to hire a psychometrician or we need to hire someone who has a highly technical focus, completely different. But otherwise, we should be able to train you on anything you need to know to be successful. And that's half the value of mentorship, coaching, and a constructive and safe environment when it comes to employment. And so that's what we hold to in my current organization is we hire for attitude. If you look at our team that drills wells, the average education level is second grade. They completed a second grade education, and they have drilled wells all over Uganda for 10% of the price of commercial drillers, and with great outcomes while supporting their family and being able to put their kids back in school. And that's what I'm super passionate about, is that education takes many forms, and it's not always the formal route. And that's why I am finally, in my later years, I wasn't earlier open about the fact, like, yeah, I did drop out of college once. I wasn't very open about that before. But I want other people to understand that it's okay. And you can still find a path to success.
So what were your initial days challenges?
Oh, well, of course, making money. Making money. Challenge. All day long. I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek because when I worked in the U.S., I was in a very high-level executive role. I had a large team. I was very involved in their development and the plans for them. I made a lot of money. But at the end of the day, I missed birthdays. I missed holidays. I was not happy. And I was not this version of myself. So when it comes down to the initial challenges that I faced, a lot of them came down to self-doubt. And I don't think that this is uncommon for marginalized populations, women, people who haven't followed the straight and narrow course of, I have a 4-year degree, I'm totally capable. You question yourself more. And so when I think about initial challenges, they were actually what motivated me the most to make life changes. So that's what drove me to move to New York, was like, I feel stuck. I don't feel intellectually stimulated. The college I'm going to doesn't suit my intellectual needs, nor does it suit my best way of learning. And everyone has a different learning style. And this is something I want to emphasize so much to anyone who's questioning, like, am I a failure if I don't complete a 4-year degree? Absolutely not. There are so many amazing career paths for those who decide to take a gap year or decide to not fulfill. But my initial challenge was largely like struggling with the pressure that was placed upon me from a father who has a PhD and a mother who worked in education, and feeling this pressure that, like, oh, you're letting the family down. And I was like, you know what? It's my life. And that's when I moved to New York. I had less than $2,000 in my bank account in New York City. So I was like, all right, I'm probably going to be here for about 3 months before I either starve or I wind up like begging my parents to take me home. And I wound up living there for 5 years, and it changed my life. Putting myself through that amount of challenges that you face as you grow and as you experience new types of opportunities, as you talk to strangers, as you interact. New York did that for me. So I had a very comfortable executive career for almost 15 years. And what I realized when COVID hit was like, I hate this. I'm not happy. And I feel the same way I did when I decided to abandon everything and move to New York. And with the 12-year-old, he's now 12, he was 10 at the time, but we decided to do the same thing. So we sold our house, we sold our car, we put everything in, like a storage unit that was of any value, and we left. And that's why we're in Africa, because the number one thing I've learned is that life is short, life is fragile, and if you wait until retirement, which was what I was thinking, like, oh, of course I'm going to retire in Africa. That's my passion. That's where I want to be. But what COVID taught us was life is way too fragile for that. And why not just go now? And so I would say the challenges are what taught me to recognize when I'm being complacent and when I'm settling into a routine that isn't healthy, and when I'm not continuing with a growth mindset. Hence why we moved to Africa. Here we are.
So how was the transition from New York to Africa?
Oh, it was actually beautiful. So we had a couple stops along the way. We started in Portugal because as soon as the borders, I'm fairly savvy about traveling after a lot of international work. But as soon as we were starting to see the borders close, I was like, Asa is my oldest son. Pack your suitcase. We are out of here. We are not going to ride this out in the United States. Not happening. So we got into Portugal right before the borders closed. We spent almost a year there and just traveled together. And we lived on a fruit farm with a family for a period of time. The kids got to share a language. It was so beautiful. We spent 6 months in Egypt, where like really getting deep into the history, and Egypt is just it's fascinating beyond what we even comprehend, because they haven't uncovered it all yet, and they keep finding new amazing things. So we spent time there, and then I really wanted him to experience what I consider ultra poverty. And when I volunteered in Africa before, it was always by myself, and that's why we chose Uganda. Was I wanted him to have that chance to see, like, wow, this is life totally different than mine, and also I can relate to these children. And that is where we had onward tickets. Our plan was to go to Dubai because I have work there and partnerships there. But what we realized is that happiness is more important, and I can fly to Dubai if I need to, but being present and being here for my children, and that's what led me to overcome those challenges and ultimately have another child, which I said I would never do.
So according to you, what is the most important part of an entrepreneurship journey?
I don't ever encourage people to pursue entrepreneurship, and I'm going to tell you why. Because you know in your heart if it's for you. You know that you are at the point where you are ready and you have the skills, capabilities, knowledge, and value proposition to be an entrepreneur. I have that in my heart, in my skill set, on my resume, and that's why I'm able to do so now. Would I ever tell someone personally, without knowing them deeply, that they are there? Absolutely not. And that's where both the formal and informal mentorship components can come in, because those may be people that encourage you, like, yes, take that jump. But when you decide to, you also leave a lot behind. You leave behind the water cooler conversations. You leave behind health benefits. You leave behind social interactions that maybe were important to you. And entrepreneurship is a lonely, hard journey, but it's not worth foregoing if you have the ambition, you have the plan, and you have the right people to help support you along the way. I've been exceedingly fortunate, both in decision making and in support structure, to be able to do that for myself, for our family, and to ultimately, today's Cinco de Mayo, which we laughed about. It's, it doesn't matter in Uganda, but we went and had tacos for lunch, and it should be a school day, but we homeschool our kids, so it was totally fine. Could I have done that in my previous life? No. So there's trade-offs, there's benefits, but I would never tell someone outright, like, you should be an entrepreneur, without really getting into the, do you have the stamina? And also, do you have the risk tolerance to go forward with that journey? Can you handle failure? I can handle failure. I'm very good with the word no. It's like one of my favorite words, because no just means try harder. And that's why I love it, and it motivates me to be better at what I do. When a potential client tells me no, that means try harder. That means do better. That doesn't mean no. That means come back to me when you have a better solution. And I think the more that we embrace the reality of entrepreneurship versus working for a company, and also provide outlets for people who've lived it, walked it, done it, to share their lived experiences, the more we should really support each individual in making a decision about what structure is right for them.
So what was the thought process behind starting HealthEd Global?
It was something that had been heavy on my heart for a long time, to be very honest. I have worked in global healthcare for about 12 years, both in a voluntary capacity and in a formal capacity in my prior roles. So you name any continent except for Antarctica, I've been there. I've looked at your health systems. I've looked at your curriculum. I understand. And while everyone believes they're a unique snowflake, they're not. The problems that exist, whether it's a developing country or a first world scenario, they're the same. The statistics are just different. And what really lit my fire was the work I started to do in Africa and recognizing the plight of how underserved women and children were. And that was the impetus to fund HealthEd Global. So we offer certifications, training, just what we would consider in developed countries like basic orientations and basic human needs being met. But we're offering those in low income, unstable countries. So we're currently operating in 14 countries in Africa. And the real reason was health equity. Like my husband is Ugandan. He is born and raised in the village that we work in. And we had the unfortunate situation where when we were getting married, his sister died based on a medical error in a public hospital. It was completely avoidable. And that was a call to action for me. And that was when I shifted gears to being like, we have to fix the system. And I may be one voice with one team, with one set of capabilities, but I guarantee that we can become a dual roar. And that's what kind of created the focus. We operate in the UAE, India, the Philippines, and largely in Africa right now, just based on my physical presence. We do have some clients in the United States as well, but our main focus is on making education accessible, equitable, and affordable. In a lot of these areas, it's just not. And we've found a way to do that. So that's what makes me happy every day, that I have the chance to wake up and do that and help mothers, help babies, help fathers, and help them potentially change the course of what may be a different outcome.
So how easy and difficult was to take your first step when you started HealthEd Global?
I am someone who makes decisions quickly. So I can look at a set of circumstances, and for me, what motivates me most is social impact and social responsibility, second only to my own personal well-being and happiness. But if I'm looking at it from the lens of why did I create a company around this, it was because the need was so evident. When I came out here, and the intent was to just stay in Uganda for a month, and the more I got to work with these girls, Uganda had the longest lockdown in the entire world, 2 years. No one was allowed to go to school, leave their homes. We were part of that. And so I have girls in my clinic that are 10, 11 years old, pregnant. They don't know how they're pregnant, why they're pregnant, what is happening. And that was the impetus for me to say, like, whoa, we've got a major problem. And that was the big focus, was we need to make access to safe care equitable. And that's what drove the creation of the company that we founded. The certifications that we have created, the focus on, and they're all free of charge. So anybody who watches this and has an interest, all of our content is open source and free of charge, because I am a huge believer that there's no reason why education or healthcare should be inaccessible because you don't have a couple of dollars. That doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that we're helping impact the outcomes and sustainable development goals, and that we are supporting women, children, and families to live better lives.
So as a Director Voluntary Rural Empowerment, what are your roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, so I'm technically the co-founder. My husband is the founder. I lead most of our fundraising efforts. So we've been able to really kind of paint this picture of the ecosystem and how it is failing common people. And that's why we have both a HealthEd Global is a for-profit entity. The Voluntary Rural Empowerment is a nonprofit entity. The two are interconnected. So 20% of every sale that you make with HealthEd Global goes directly into voluntary rural empowerment. Voluntary rural empowerment is all about creating sustainable lifestyles for people in Africa right now, because that's where we are, and to respect their culture, not change it. And I think that is what is super important, because we see these people like swooping in, swooping out, USAID, this, that, the other. And you see this in India too, I'm sure, where they come in with this fancy pants idea, but they have no staying power, and they're not going to see it through. And so our focus was to create the first kind of modern village community, as we refer to it, that is a place of safety, a place of gathering, and a place of hope. So that's where we're building our schools, access to clean water, completely free, access to food if you're hungry, completely free, access to an education if you demonstrate that you earn nothing, tuition free. The first block of schools is done. We're building 3 more. We are also providing childcare for women who, and women is a strong term, girls who got pregnant during COVID and couldn't otherwise return, so that they have the ability to breastfeed and participate as a parent as well as a student. So our NGO is honestly our strongest arm, and where my heart is. It just doesn't pay the bills, so I have to keep doing the other things. If that paid the bills, that is all I would do all day long. But we've been creating this block of 8 acres to model what a safe, structured community environment could look like, and how we make that appealing without being disruptive to cultural, religious, or even just economical values. And I'm very grateful for my husband. As I mentioned, Moses is from the community. He's from Bukadia. And so he is the one that I'm grateful for opening my eyes on how to do this the right way. I consider him an amazing mentor as well, as someone who is my best friend.
So what advice would you like to give to young professionals who want to enter into social sector?
Yes. So I want you to be vocal. The number one thing that I see, and I'm working with a group of, they're in their senior classes now, they're about to graduate, and working with them to prepare for college applications. And so I'm going to give you the same advice that I give them. Like, be fluid. You don't know who you are yet. You don't know who you're going to be in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. My life has changed dramatically over the course of that period. And don't be beholden to what someone else expects you to do, or who they expect you to be, or how much money they expect you to earn, or who you should marry. Abandon those concepts. Let that go. And find people who have your best interest at heart with nothing to gain. Those are the best sources of insight. Those can be teachers. Those could be people like you, people like me in the community that are there, that can listen, that can give you guidance. But the number one piece of advice I would give is you be you. There is no right way to do life other than doing it the way that makes you happy. And happy is often an elusive concept, because especially with social media, you're constantly comparing your level of happiness to someone else's level of happiness. Oh, they're on a yacht. Oh, they must be so much happier. And those are usually the people that are the most miserable. Let's just be real. They are. And I would encourage everyone to also take a break from that. I take extensive breaks from social media. I use it for my business, but I definitely don't use it for my personal life, because I don't need to compare myself to anyone else, nor should you. And if I could give the biggest piece of advice that I think is leading to the uptick in teen suicide, teen depression, what our children are going through right now, having children of my own who I shelter like a mama bird for as long as I can, is there's no right way to do it. And there's no problem with failing. Like, love it, embrace it, and talk about it. So I think the biggest thing is just don't let any of the pressures that come upon you, largely from your devices. Like, if I could just throw that away, I probably would, but for my business, I have to have it. But don't let that influence your sense of self-worth, and always look for what's the path that's perfect for you, not what people believe you should be. No one believed that this is where I should be.
So what are do's and don'ts you should remember while starting your professional journey?
So I think the do's is understand where your intrinsic motivation lies. And when I talk about intrinsic motivation, like, that's what makes your heart pump. That's what makes you feel a sense of value. And I can tell you, I came to Africa for the first time 15 years ago by myself with a backpack, no hotel booked, and this was during national elections in Nairobi, and it was a nightmare. But what I did find out of that experience was the absolute beauty of the human spirit, similar to what I shared about the sentiment in Greece. When people spot a person that needs help or needs guidance, the right people tend to be there for you, and they tend to support you. And that is part of the reason why I fell in love with Africa, is sitting in alleys, drinking completely hot beer, talking to people about their lives, sharing our stories when they have nothing to give, inviting me to their homes. Go embrace the world. The world is bigger than the state you live in. The world is bigger than the country you live in. The world is so in need of change makers who aren't afraid to go and just, again, Malcolm Gladwell style, talk to strangers. Put your phone in your pocket. Talk to people. Just say hello. Look at what they're wearing. Do they have an emblem? Do they work for an NGO? Do they work for a company you're interested in? The second piece of advice I would give them is, you don't understand the value of a network until you create one. And that doesn't have to be limited to your personal Facebook account. Some of the greatest people I've ever met, as highlighted by my marital journey, has been through LinkedIn and sharing values and sharing a purpose and a commitment to service, or whatever that looks like for you. Maybe your commitment is to car sales. Good, get it. Find a community. Find a community that embraces you, loves you, and empowers you.
So now we'll start a rapid round.
Let's go.
So what would be your favorite, employed or entrepreneur?
Oh, entrepreneur, all the way.
Success in one line.
Making sure others succeed.
According to you, what is the strongest part to achieve success? Is it luck, hard work, or smart work?
I believe it's personal relationships. I would nix all three of those. It's how you relate to others. It's being humble, it's being present, and it's being passionate about whatever it is that you're doing.
Your favorite destination?
Madagascar.
Your favorite adventure?
Cave diving with my son when he was way underage in Belize.
Your favorite
They allowed us to do it anyway.
Your favorite color?
Typically black.
So if I say define yourself in one line, what would be that one line?
I want to be the change I want to see in the world.
So thank you very much for your precious time and lovely conversation on our show. It's was a pleasure talking to you and listening to each and everything that you have shared on our show.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.